such a time as this.
And welcome back to Roundtable. We are glad to have back in studio Tom Hampson, interview part 2. Vicki, I'm going to hand it over to you, but before I do, I want to encourage everyone, as usual, please go to our website as we continue to get censored. We were kicked off of YouTube a few weeks ago because of, I don't know why, but go to our website for such a time as this .today, for such a time as this .today, not .com, not .org, .today, for such a time as this .today, to always keep up with our newest material. So here we go. We had him in before. It was good, and oh boy, I can't wait to talk about what he told us before then. But Vicki, it's on you.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We had a great first interview with Tom Hampson. There's so much to talk about that we wanted to do. We didn't fit it all in, so we brought him back for a part 2. Tom's had really an incredible career, a lot of it focused on protecting children. So welcome, Tom. Thanks for coming back.
It's good to be here.
Thanks. And we just wanted to, if you wouldn't mind sharing with everybody who you are and what you've done. I know you started out in the Air Force.
Right. I was an intelligence analyst in the Air Force during the Vietnam War. And then after college, I started working for the Illinois Legislative Investigating Commission, which more commonly was known as the Illinois Crime Investigating Commission. Our primary responsibility there was to investigate organized crime and official misconduct. Eventually, I became chief investigator, and also we conducted an 8-year investigation during my years there that into the sexual exploitation of children. That turned out to be the most extensive investigation of its kind in that topic that's ever been done by any law enforcement agency. So it remains a seminal investigation. There are 3 reports that came out of it. Afterwards, I had my own investigation business for a little over 20 years, and a number of the investigations involved the child protection issues. And then a few years ago, I was hired by DCFS to investigate the predator priests in Illinois. So I have a substantial experience in this area. Actually, during the course of my career, I've investigated every kind of predator known to man. So that was I've had a pretty broad base contact with terrible people.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
I have a quick question because I've been when you run into these terrible people, do many of them seem normal?
Well, most of them are very charismatic, very nice people. They seem to be very nice people. In fact, some of the most likable people I've ever met are some of the most evil people I've ever encountered.
Wow.
it's fascinating.
That is.
Doesn't surprise me that you say that, though, because when you watch documentaries on some of these
Yes.
terrible people,
They're very likable.
They appear very likable to the people around them.
Well, a classic example is Ted Bundy that everybody knows about. He was a very charming, very likable person. Nobody had any idea. The woman that wrote Anne Rule, she wrote all the books about the crime. She actually served in a hotline with Ted Bundy, and she wrote the book, I think it was her first book, called The Stranger Beside Me. That was about Ted Bundy.
Wow.
So, she was shocked that a lot of times when I've done investigations of these predators, people will say, just seemed like a really nice guy, can't understand. Mm-hmm. But they always had something that, they said they always knew that there was something that just wasn't quite right about him. But they couldn't figure it out. And the reason for that is the super predators like Ted Bundy and some of the other ones are psychopaths, and psychopaths don't have the ability to feel the way normal people do. So what they project is they seem to project the same kind of emotions we have, but they're mimicking emotions. And sometimes their mimicking is just a little bit off.
No.
And it was described to me by this psychologist that specialized in psychopaths. One time he said that it's like they know the lyrics, but they can't quite hear the music. And so they're just a little bit off for somebody that has empathy. They can see there's just something not quite right about it, just slightly out of tune.
Mm-hmm.
But the very good ones are excellent mimickers.
I realize we place a really high premium, it seems to me, in our culture on being nice. But being nice is completely different than being good and being decent.
Right.
And people don't seem to be able to tell the difference.
Well, and we're too dependent on how we feel about somebody
Yeah.
rather than what's observable about
Right,
them.
what they're actually doing.
And we trust people even though we clearly can see that they have narcissistic tendencies. I mean, look at all the politicians that we have who clearly are self-focused, self-serving, self-centered narcissists. And yet we keep electing them. And yet narcissism is the foundation of all predatory behavior.
Oh,
We shouldn't trust them at all because they care about themselves, not other people.
they don't have, I mean, we all, sin comes out of a man, right? I mean, that's what the Bible tells us. But most of us have shame and we have guilt when we sin.
Right.
But maybe that's a difference too.
Right.
That
Well,
they
narcissists don't have that.
Either one
It's
of
somebody
those
else's
things.
fault.
Right. It's always somebody else's fault. So it's not their fault.
Right.
Interesting.
That can that be said about most people who don't know the Lord? I mean, sin, the default position of sin is a self-centeredness, right? I think what's labeled narcissism, they take it to a different level.
Right. Well,
It is a very, very heaping sense of self-centeredness.
Well, there's a lot of people, though, I've been all over the world. I've met people from other religions too that can be very kind and self-focused, but they also can be those that are kind and self-serving, other-serving, self-sacrificing. And so you don't necessarily have to be a Christian to be self-sacrificing, but if you call yourself a Christian, you can't be anything but self-sacrificing. Unfortunately, there's too many Christians that doesn't apply.
Right.
Self-professing Christians. Yes.
Right.
I was an unbeliever till I was 38. So, I had guilt and I did have shame, but boy, it became acute when I became a believer and God brought that whole parade of sin that I had done in front of my eyes. It was kind of painful. Period of time there.
There's been an increase. You can see the problems getting worse because since 1980, there's been a series of studies that have been done, a continual study since 1980 of people that, college students that score on the narcissistic personality inventory. There was one given to them, and there's been a 30% increase in narcissistic tendencies among college students since 1980.
Oh, I believe it.
Oh,
So
wow.
you can see that in our culture is becoming much
you
more
can.
self-focused, self-serving.
It's called Facebook.
Yeah,
Right.
and Instagram and
Right.
all that's making it so much worse.
And trophies for everybody.
Facebook makes everyone a god of their world, right?
Yeah.
It's just.
Well,
that's what it is.
And there's been a dramatic increase in depression, anxiety, suicides
Right.
Yep.
as a result of it. 30% of teenage girls have considered suicide.
That's amazing.
Wow.
That's amazing.
So, Tom, you also are the founder of a foundation called the Truth Alliance Foundation. And what led you to start that foundation?
Well, I started it because after I did the investigation for DCFS into the predator priests, I saw. I'd always known the destruction and devastation that child sexual abuse did to a child and to the family. Yeah. But what I saw in the church was not just that emotional and psychological kind of devastation that they experienced, but also a spiritual devastation. Yeah. I saw individuals and their entire families turn their back to God.
Yeah, they blame
and
God.
Right, and so and they think that because they've been their child was abused by a priest, and in the Catholic Church, the priest is the stand-in for Christ, and so they look at them different than a denominational pastor, and so it affected them so profoundly that they turned completely away from God. So I saw the spiritual destruction in the church, and I thought, well, obviously locking these people up, we're not locking them up fast enough. The problem continues to get worse, and I thought that I needed to try to figure out something in my retirement that we could come up with a better way to protect children from these predators, and so that's why I started.
And that was to be able to spot them ahead of time.
Yeah.
Find out what characteristics are, so that people can try and spot them before they commit the crime.
Right,
and save the children.
Because what we're doing now screens out. They do background checks on people for all kinds of positions where they work with kids. Mm-hmm. But what we do now screens out less than 2% of the predators. 98% of the predators get through the background investigations and are able to work with kids with no problem at all. And so I figured that there needed to be a better way to spot them, because you can't arrest your way out of this problem. You have to set up a barrier between the child and the predator to keep the predator away.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of an analogy I heard, to where a guy had a garden and he wanted to stop the squirrels from destroying his garden. And he said, I probably shouldn't say this on radio, but I'm going to say it. He said after about 103 of them with his BB gun, he said it just kept coming. There was no way to stop it. He had to build a barrier around the garden, because for every squirrel he killed, 2 more showed up. And the only way to stop it was to build a barrier around his garden. And what you're saying is, you can lock them up all you want, they're just going to keep coming.
Right, and they're letting them out too early. See, one of the things I learned in the investigation was that back in the 60s, there was a priest that started the Servants of the Paraclete that willingly accepted some of these priests who had been involved in sexual sin with adults and with kids. And within a very short period of time, he decided that there was a hopeless cause. And he wrote to his bishop and met with the Pope and said, there is no help, there's no hope for these people. We need to buy an island and put them on it and never let them off.
Well, there's actually a cheaper way to handle that.
That's
but I
right.
won't say that on the radio.
Right, but that was he said he said these are demons, these are devils, and there's no hope for them.
Yeah.
And once they get arrested and locked up, I don't think they should ever be let out again.
Right. So, Tom, we met years ago when we were both interested in what was going on in our local school district. And obviously here at New Hope, we've been doing a lot of work, Abby and Pastor James and myself, with regard to bringing awareness to our community about the sexualization of children in our schools. And Tom is also now a writer with Illinois Family Institute.
Yes.
Which is wonderful. And you wrote an article recently, just on February 1st here, a month ago, and you talk about this study that Carol Shake's staff completed on educator sexual misconduct almost 20 years ago, where she said that 9.6% of children in our schools, public and private, are victims of educator sexual misconduct between kindergarten and 12th grade. And almost nothing's been done about this. And people don't talk about
Goodness, 9%?
That's so hard to
9.6,
believe.
almost 10%.
Almost 10%.
Right. Well, she and this actually happened right at the same time. That report came out right at the same time that the Boston Globe released its study or its expose of the scandal in the Catholic Church. And the scandal in the Catholic Church was just enormously received all over the country. It was like a shockwave went through the country, and yet Carol Shakespeare at the time that happened said the problem in our public schools is 100 times worse than it is in the churches, and yet that was not picked up. Nobody paid any attention to it. It's just like they buried the entire cause. And since that time, there's been virtually nothing that has been done to address this problem anywhere. And largely the problem is the result of teachers' unions protecting the teachers, the bad teachers, from being tossed off the job. There was a case up in Wisconsin several years ago I looked at. It was just absolutely appalling to me. A teacher was between classes. He wasn't working. He was sitting at his desk in his classroom. He didn't have a classroom of students then, and he was on the school computer, laptop, and he was watching porn at the school on a school computer. Some kids came in to ask him a question, and the porn kept playing on the computer, and so that they wound up telling somebody, and the principal fired this teacher. The courts in Wisconsin made the school rehire the teacher because it wasn't of course, he was represented by the teachers union, and the courts made the school rehire him because it wasn't specified in the contract that he couldn't watch pornography on a school computer, which is absurd, and that's how the teachers union got him rehired. So to me, this is the kind of insanity that's going on, and whose interests are the unions protecting here?
You know what? I think it's sad to say this whole Epstein case has shown us how high and how prevalent the sexual deviance goes.
Right. Well, and how many people have been prosecuted in this Epstein case?
One.
That's right. One.
That's all.
Two.
Who?
Ghislaine Max.
That's the only one I know.
And Epstein.
Well, he wasn't
Epstein.
prosecuted.
He was not prosecuted.
He would have been.
I think somebody.
They killed him.
I think he was killed.
No. The rumor, Abby, is that had he said, "You prosecute me, I'm gonna sing like a songbird." That's why he was. That's why he was suicide.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Well, they have dozens of cameras in all the places that he was at, and interior cameras.
Yeah.
They supposedly have thousands of hours of videotape. Yeah. Well, where is the prosecution?
Yeah.
This is just an outrage.
They don't even try to hide it.
If you believe he was suicide, I got a bridge I want to sell you.
Yeah.
But that shows you just how deep and prevalent. Again, the things we're learning at the school task force here is blowing my mind. How you're catching schools putting pornography, and it's flat out hardcore pornography, in the hands of kids, and nobody's getting fired.
Well, there was the Illinois or the Chicago Public School IG came out with a report. There was a teacher in Chicago Public Schools that was conducting some kind of online class with a few of his students, and he accidentally shared pornography in this online. The kids, he shared this pornography that was on his computer with these children.
In like a Zoom class?
Yeah, there's some kind of a Zoom class. So the pornography is playing during the class or something, and it was inadvertent. It was a mistake. Mm-hmm. So instead of being fired, they basically just said, well, we're going to have to have you be re-educated in some way. So nothing really happened to him. Mm. No, why?
And he had porn literally at his fingertips that on his computer.
Right, on his
that
computer.
He
accidentally showed it first. I just don't
can't make this
understand
up.
it. Why would the teachers union defend him?
We know the answer to that question. Why does evil defend evil?
right.
I think it's just shocking to people how prevalent this is.
Yeah, and there's one thing I think we talked about at the end of part one was this Chicago Public Schools, the OIG report from late 18 to 2022. They've had 1,700 cases opened for abuse allegations.
Right.
And
Where
only
is this?
Chicago Public Schools.
Just in Chicago? I thought that was nationwide.
No, that's just Chicago.
And only 16
over a 4-year period of time.
They only did, out of 1,700 cases, only 16 criminal charges, right?
Yeah, not all of them were convicted, and they don't explain in the report who was even prosecuted and who got off and who was convicted.
Oh, they
and
don't
what they
name
got.
them at all. Wow.
Well, that's a public record. Prosecutions are public records.
So we know the names.
No, but they didn't disclose them in the report. So
How is
we
that
don't.
legal?
I don't know.
Oh. Oh, wow.
I heard somewhere
wow.
that the Catholic Church abuse is as terrible as it was, and really I think a lot of that was about the leadership who just moved these priests around, and it's there are going to be bad apples in every bunch, right?
Sure.
Right.
But it was the leaders. But that was like, I heard something like 2% of priests or something, which is still a lot of
It's a lot of priests, right?
But it was nothing compared to teachers,
Right.
Like
Well,
not even close.
And see, the Catholic Church was accused of moving people from parish
right,
to parish,
which was the real.
and that is exactly what's happening in the
supercrime.
schools as well. The schools are moving people from one place to another. If they get a bunch of complaints, they'll just move them to another school, rather than making the effort to prosecute them and deal with them. And so that's what. And again, that's because they're protected by the unions, and the unions are. See, to me, if you're a teacher and you're in a teachers union, yeah, you want to protect the teachers and protect their rights and make sure that they're not abused in some way, not used and abused by their bosses. But you also have an obligation to the students who you're supposed to be teaching.
You would think.
And so why would you want to have a teacher who is showing every sign that he has of predatory behavior?
Right.
When a teacher engages in activity that is known to be grooming behaviors, I don't know why any union would come to his defense.
Yeah.
Because I think the unions are completely corrupt. But let me just say, too, when you have, just as an aside, has nothing to do with sexualization of kids or child abuse, but when you have a government employee union, you've got an inherent problem there to begin with, because those unions work to elect people who, like for instance, in the schools,
right?
They work to elect school board members who are then charged with negotiating the contracts of the union members. So it's a colossal. The whole thing, even on its face, is a colossal,
it's
massive
public money, and it's essentially public money that's being donated back to politicians.
Right, and then the community has no representation.
Right.
That's so it used to be illegal for government employees to unionize.
Right, I think it should be again.
It ought to be. Yes, it certainly should.
Yeah, and one of the people on our school board here in our high school district 211 that the union is supporting is Kim Cavill, who is a sex podcaster.
Right.
You know, she's got many
children.
terrible podcasts geared towards teens and tweens.
Yes.
Right.
All about anal, telling people, the kids, that it takes a lot of lube. I mean, you just
Unbelievable.
cannot, you just can't believe this is
Well, and
happening.
that's the kind of that actually is some material that was produced by the Toronto Planned Parenthood group that's being promoted within the National Education Association to be taught to 6th grade to 8th grade students, and it has all these different sexual activities.
There were words in there I've never heard before.
Well, there's some things in this document that I didn't learn even existed until I was in my 60s.
Right.
So I was think,
Yeah, I
man,
can see on the back. I can see it's in your hand, Tom.
Yeah,
lots
right.
and lots of lube.
Right.
See?
Well, why would they be teaching? Why would they be teaching 6th grade to 8th grader not just about anal sex, but how to engage in it, how to
Right.
engage in
'Cause they're
fisting
evil.
and rimming and all these things? These are things that the children shouldn't
Because they're
even
evil.
know about.
There's no other way. I mean, they're how many years under the age of legal consent?
Right.
It's unbelievable. So one of the things also we wanted to talk about today that we didn't get to last time was, so the educators who are not perverts to start with, and they went into education for the right reason, theoretically, how do they get desensitized to be able to teach this stuff?
Oh boy.
Well,
And
there.
the role of the Methodist Church,
That's
all of that.
It's really quite shocking that I discovered several years ago about how engaged the church was in the development of some of the some of the really horrible kinds of materials that are now commonplace and in common usage. If somebody is going to be a certified, what they call ASEC certified association, it's the Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. That's the main organization that certifies these groups of people. And as a sex educator, counselor, or therapist, to be certified, you have to go through what's called a sexual attitude restructuring class, which is generally, it could be for a whole weekend, or usually it's for a 7-day course. That you have a number of different classes that you have to go through, but it culminates in this video that is was actually designed and put together by 2 Methodist ministers, funded by the Methodist Church, co-funded by the Glide Foundation and also by the Playboy Foundation. And
What?
Is that in your article, Tom?
no, it's
Okay,
not.
all right.
I'm actually
That'll be his next
I'm
article.
actually going to write about that, and it's I have a description of it. There was a person that went through this SAR class that describes it, and it's the very culminating of this whole course that he went through. He said, the sensory overload reached its climax on Saturday night with a multimedia event called the Efforama. You can fill out the words yourself.
Yeah.
As we lounged on cushions in the darkness, the whole wall lit up with images of human beings and sometimes animals engaging in every conceivable sexual act, accompanied by wails, squeals, moans, shouts, and the first movement of Tchaikovsky's violin concerto. It was a technical triumph. Up to 17 simultaneous moving pictures, mostly excerpted from commercial pornography, projected over a period of 40 minutes. How did we react? There was shock, laughter, sporadic arousal, and finally boredom. By the end of the Efforama, nothing seemed shocking. The physical act of sexual joining seemed commonplace. I considered myself thoroughly desensitized. And this is exactly what they start teaching kids, and what the teachers themselves have already been taught. They're teaching our children to be desensitized to all manner of sexual activity. Starting in kindergarten and even in preschool, they're teaching children that the doctor only guessed whether they were a boy or a girl based on what they looked like, that they have to decide through the course of their life how to what they are. They teach these children that there are multiple sexual identities that you can have, that you can be on a spectrum. You can be a girl one day, a boy the next day. This is confusing the children. This is
Or neither one. And then there are 900 of them, remember?
Right.
That's what we were told.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, they become accustomed to the idea that sex is really not that significant. That it's okay to experiment. It's okay to and children have a right to this. There is a natural right for all children to engage in sexual activity, and that the teacher's job is to liberate the children from the oppression of their parents who are preventing them from engaging in this activity whenever and with whomever they want. And so this is what's happening in our schools, and this has to stop.
Here's one of the arguments from the other side, Tom. I'd be interested to get your take. When they say there's no harm in teaching kids at a very young age that they're neither girl nor boy, what have you seen practically that leads to? Do you understand my question? Because they said it's not teaching them how to have sex. It's just simply teaching them not to be confined by the two genders.
Well, but they are teaching them how to have sex. I've got the material right here that shows that they describe specifically how to do this. But the other thing, just if they taught them about
the genders,
genders, that kind of thing, it is a confusing thing. The children begin to accept it, because first of all, a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old, they don't have the capacity to put things together. But as the child gets older, they start to have more and more reasoning capacity. So then things don't start adding up, and they become and it causes ultimately a confusion that they feel this inside, a confusion and anxiety about who and what they are.
It places because it places that question obviously in every child's head.
Right.
Unless, how can it not?
And the thing is that Pavlov, a study that Pavlov did that wasn't as well known as his famous
dog study,
salivating
dog study.
Yeah, this one he did with dogs too, but he taught dogs to point to a circle. If they pointed to the circle, it would be rewarded. If they pointed to the oval, it would get zapped. It'd be punished. And over time, during the course of the study, Pavlov changed the oval to look more and more like a circle. At some point, the dogs couldn't distinguish between the circle and the oval. And so many of them just didn't do anything. They wouldn't point to anything. But some of them went nuts. Some of them started running around in circles and barking and yelping and drooling and not knowing really what. They basically went nuts and became just overcome with anxiety because they couldn't decide. And this is what's happening to our kids. This is what you can see in the anxiety level and the depression in children is skyrocketing. And a lot of that is due to this confusion in school. It's also due, of course, to the social media and all of the sexualization of our entire culture. There's no stability.
It's like the ultimate gaslighting.
Right, yeah.
Of little kids. They don't know a lot. One of the things they learn, it's like an landmark of development, is the difference between boys and girls. I mean, and they don't know much, and then you take that and you eliminate that. And so where are they left? I mean, it's just I'm not expressing myself well, but it destabilizes them.
Yes, it's
they
almost
have no
like
foundation.
No foundation. It's almost like if you're going to teach a kid math, but you're going to start off by saying 2 + 2 is not 4. They're always going to struggle in math if you take away the basis of it. And let me just thinking. This brought up something. When you say in kindergarten you're neither a boy nor a girl, what do you think a child 5 years old is going to say? They're going to say, "Well,
what am I?"
Not only what am I, but what is the difference between boys and girls? If I'm neither, I'm neither. The reason I'll say that, and so you're introducing sex by even saying that.
Right.
Let me tell you a story I had. I had this one lady at a church I went to years ago, in which she had a kid who was adopted, and I forget exactly how old he was, but she explained to him, because he was an inquisitive child, and she said, for whatever reason, we were in a grocery store, and he said, "Mommy, what is the difference between boys and girls?" He goes, "Boys." Well, And she said, maybe I made a mistake, but I told him, I said, you know what? Girls don't have a pee-pee like you have.
In the grocery store.
Right? In the grocery store, whatever, right? So she said she was checking out at the grocery store, and she looked up. It was a long line, and women ahead of her going, oh! And then the next one, oh! And she said, what is going on? So by the fourth one, her son was going from each woman to woman saying, do you have a penis? Do you have a penis? Do you have a penis? And she took her son and just ran out of the store and left all the groceries right there. But when you start explaining the difference in boys and girls, by definition, you start to talk about sex.
Yeah. Right.
So the argument, we're just teaching, when I talk about sex, we're just talking about genders. Well, how do you talk about genders without talking about sex? Right. You can't. That's a way of introducing children to the topic, and it is devious, and it is evil, and it's dishonest. It is, because I don't know, 5-year-old kids, do they really know? They don't know unless somebody tells them.
No.
But girls had long hairs. I remember when I was 5 years old. They're pretty and they got long hairs. That's all the difference I knew. Mm-hmm. You didn't think about the other stuff. At least 5-year-olds, I didn't.
Insidious.
I mean, why can't you just say, yeah, I mean, this is what you should say. You're a boy. You're a girl.
Yeah.
You can, but that doesn't mean that you're limited. You can be any kind of girl you want. You can be any kind of boy you want. There's no right way to be.
That's just an
either.
excuse.
It is. It's just
the so-called stereotyping. There have never been more options for men and women, regardless, than ever in history than there are right now.
We're the ones who are against the stereotypes. They're the ones using the stereotypes,
right? To validate themselves, basically, in their own perversity.
Well, it's even worse than that, because the children are being taught that the teachers are liberating them from the oppression of their parents.
Yes.
And many of the teachers are even, well, I don't know many, but the teachers are instructed to withhold information from the parents that the child tells them. So now the child is telling secrets to the teacher. This is a classic grooming kind of behavior.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You're right.
That's exactly
is teaching
what it
a
is.
child to keep secrets from their parents. So
yes,
they have completely institutionalized the process of grooming into the entire educational system.
Yes.
And in addition to that, they're teaching them sexual activities, showing them sexualized pictures not only in the class but also in the libraries that they provide, which desensitizes children to actual sexual activity. It makes them much more of a target to a predator, a slick predator that can
You're
say,
laying the groundwork.
hey, you want to try some of this out? We can try this. And they told you we should. You should, in order to know about it, you really need to engage in it. And a lot of them are. Some of these LGBT clubs, GLSEN and GSA and these kind of things, many people join these in order to recruit children into that, vulnerable children into that group and into the lifestyle, so that they can exploit them. There's no screening of these people. The abuse of children within schools is greatly increasing from other peers, not just the teachers, but other peers are sexually abusing them more and more. Because a lot of it is because they are being primed by the sex education material that they're being taught.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I remember there was, and I think I've mentioned it before, they've taken it down, but there was a video. Some journalist went into a gay bar just on a Thursday night and just started talking to the guys there and just asking them, when was your first sexual experience? And a lot of them, it was very young. And a lot of times, and it was so shocking to me at that point, that maybe they were 6 and it was the 8-year-old down the street.
Right.
So, oh my gosh. So you're just like, if you're a parent, you're afraid to even leave your child with another child in the room without you there.
Yes, well, you can't. It's and this is the other thing that's the problem with it, is that when they normalize this kind of behavior. What they also do is they say we need to celebrate, not just affirm, but celebrate
Right.
a person's sexual identity. This
Tolerance
completely
isn't enough.
negates the possibility that these kids have been sexually abused.
Right.
There's a high correlation between children who are LGBT and abuse.
Oh, of course.
It doesn't necessarily mean that that the abuse caused it or the sole cause of it or whatever. But the fact is that there's an indication that there was some kind of abuse and nobody's looking into it. Nobody's trying to determine
Sure.
what happened to the child. If you've got a kid who says that, at 9 years old, he says, I know I was born with all these boy parts, but I'm a girl. Something's wrong with that kid.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
That's not a normal thing.
But-
They're trying to make it
that's-
sound like that's normal.
No, it's not normal. Do you know who Camille Powyer is?
No.
She professor of art at Penn University. She was probably one of the most famous lesbians for many times. She was at Stonewall, she said, when the movement started. Greenwich Village, she was there. She was on the Dennis Prager show. And Dennis Prager was interviewing her about homosexuality and just her thing. She said, Dennis, I was there in the 60s when it started. I can't number the homosexuals that I know. She was a homosexual. She's a homosexual.
Right.
She said, I don't know one male who's a homosexual who was not abused. I don't know
Right.
one. I don't know one. And I know tens of thousands. I don't know one. Same thing, females. I don't know one. She said, now females, it depends. Sometimes it's emotional abuse, whatever. Females are a little different. She said, I don't know one. And Dennis Prager, he said, I'm blown away. He said, whoa, Camille, is that true with you? She said, yes.
Oh, Camille Paglia.
Yes.
Oh, yes, I know her. Yeah.
Yes. He said, is that true? She said, yes. That was on the Dennis Prager show.
Well, one
Doesn't
of
Dennis
the
have a
problems.
nephew who's gay?
One
I
of
don't
the
know
things
about
about that is that, for example, Harry Hay was clearly he was sexually abused by a 13-year-old boy when he was 11. But Harry Hay said that because he enjoyed it, that means that he was already gay. So he didn't see himself as being sexually abused, and that's what happens with a lot of them. They say, "Well, I wasn't really abused because I wanted it. It felt good." They don't recognize that that response is a normal kind of response. That it's a physical response. It isn't. It doesn't talk about. Says nothing about their identity.
Yeah.
There was something.
But the thing about the thing that's so shocking is there's a book that was written by Karen Bloom called "Forgetting How to Blush," and she goes into the whole history of how involved the church was in these early days of creating the foundation of the culture that we have today. So all of the things that you see around us now was established in conjunction with church organizations, the Methodist Church, the Lutheran Church, and several other denominations, back in the early 60s and 70s.
That is just.
And it's absolutely appalling
sick.
to me.
I will say something too, and it's related, but not exactly on topic, but I think it's so interesting. Back in 2015, 2016, when in District 211, we've talked about it many times, this was ground zero for the whole, shall we say, co-ed locker room situations that we have now. So they put the boy in the girls' locker room. They voted to do that. And they were kind of trying to win us over at that point. And I remember the superintendent, Dan Cates, sent out information to educate us, and it talked about trans. There were theories that people were born trans again, just like they're supposedly born gay, right? And it's because there's an influx of hormones in a pregnant woman
While she's pregnant,
right,
something happens in utero.
That was the idea. And so they were trying to actually give it a scientific basis and saying that it can't be changed. Of course, the kids are born this way. And there was a lot of talk of gender dysphoria. But in the short time since then, it's all shifted. And now it's just, well, biological sex is completely unconnected to gender, and there's 50 bazillion genders, and it's all normal no matter what it's not supposed to be connected. This is just now this is told to us that it's reality. So even the whole, if you even want to call it an argument, which is hard because there's nothing logical, there's no reason going on, it's just astonishing to me that now it's whatever we say it is, people, and you just get in line.
Yeah, well, it's all a lie.
Right.
There's
Absolutely.
Yeah.
there's no responsible studies that support that theory. None.
They're not. You're talking about the gender theory,
Right.
Yeah.
Nothing. There's nothing to it.
No. It's John
completely-
Money, which we actually talked about at our last
Right.
meeting.
And so he's
Talk about a monster.
yeah. It's hard to describe the kind of person he was. He was
Monster.
definitely a monster. And his study on the Reimer twins, he should have been prosecuted.
right.
For
Yeah,
that.
he
Anybody
should've.
involved in it should have been prosecuted.
Absolutely.
But to me,
So-
the most astonishing thing is that the world ate it up. That's the thing.
Why? Why is it astonishing?
Because it's crazy. Because it's crazy on its face.
Of course it is.
And to know that it's false and to run with it, I'm just
Abby,
astonished
well,
at how evil the
that's-
world really
Yes,
is.
well,
That's
yes.
the thing.
Yes,
But they
we-
did the same thing with Kinsey.
Yes.
They did the same thing with money.
This is just an extension of Kinsey, because what happens is that if you reject transgenderism, then everything else collapses too, because that transgenderism is a logical extension of their argument for everything else. Because the argument really is that men and women, we weren't designed that way.
Oh, yes.
know,
Very much so.
You have to. So now they're trying to encompass more and more of the paraphilias. That's why pedophilia
Normalize
is now
them, yeah.
it's a minor attracted person, and a lot of the fetishes are already pulled. Look at bondage and sadomasochism.
pushing
All these kinds of things are being
Lurie's Children's
incorporated
Hospital
into it, and
Is pushing that on kids.
and so that it's all being normalized, all part of the gender spectrum. And if you don't accept any one of them, then the rest of it collapses.
Yep.
That's interesting because I could see that if you knock the legs out from under homosexuality, then the whole thing collapses. But I never thought about.
Well, see, one thing leads to another, leads to
Yes,
another.
and
It's a
it
natural
clearly did.
extension, and so they have to agree with it. They have to back all these different weirdnesses up, because that keeps the focus away from the core error, which is that homosexuality is a natural outcome of nature. When it's not.
Right. Yeah, it's a rejection
It's
of the order that
it's
God
always been
set up.
considered a deviance, and it still is.
Except maybe not in ancient Greece, although we
What?
used to look back. Homosexuality was in ancient Greece. That was a thing. Men had a wife for procreation and a boy or a teenage
some of
boy
the
for
cultures.
Well, yeah.
recreation.
And some of the cultures, but there's also a study whenever you embrace that, it decays society. Many people think
Right.
that's what happened with Sparta. When they embraced that, that's when they ceased to be great.
Oh,
So yeah,
Well, the sexual immorality in Rome that
Yes.
Yeah.
caused its downfall.
but you know what saved it was Caesar Augustus. When he came, he did the familiar reforms because he recognized that would destroy us, and so that gave Rome centuries more. But he recognized the decadence that was going on there, and he exiled his own daughter because of that, even though he wasn't the.
Well, even the Greek philosophers always said that a virtuous society, in order for civilization to be sustained, you need a virtuous society.
It's nothing new under
Yeah.
the sun. Absolutely. You know what, Tom, you've been around this a lot. I have one question that I've asked other people on the other side, and to this day I have not gotten an answer. I've asked several people. So here's my question. What's the third gender?
The third gender?
Yeah. If you got male and female, what's the third one?
Well, there isn't any.
It went from 2 to 900.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we skipped 3,
2
4,
to 900.
5.
I couldn't find the third
6,
one.
I think Facebook has about 50 of them. You
Gender?
get to choose
58,
from.
yeah, it's only
Yes.
58.
58. What's the third one then? What's the fourth, fifth?
I think I've shown them to you
Well,
before.
you
You
have-
just didn't accept
you
them.
have-
as
No, I don't even
ways.
remember. I know two-spirit. I still don't know what two-spirit is.
There's aqua gender.
What does that mean?
You know, I can't remember now, but I remember
I know they're giving names, but
that
tell me
we
what.
had we had a printout and it
Two
does-
spirit.
Yeah.
Well, I told you. I think last time I mentioned that one of they introduced themselves at the National Sex Ed Conference with all their identities, and then one of them was a queer, disabled, fat femme. Now, first of all, I'm not sure what a queer is. That's not clearly defined. Nor do I know what a femme is. But it's something.
Feminine?
It's some kind. No, it's not feminine. It's a femme. I don't know.
See, I'm aware of the names they slap on, like two-spirit. But my question is, what is that? What does that
Oh,
mean?
I've got a list here of,
Go ahead.
of name.
What's the third one?
Well,
butch,
pansexual, too.
women, especially lesbians.
Butch. What does that mean?
I'm telling you.
Say it again.
I'm telling you.
Say it.
Women, especially
Right.
lesbians, tend to use this term to describe the way they express masculinity or what society defines as masculinity.
But you're using female and male in your explanation as
yes.
butch.
Well,
you can't do that. Can't
Cisgender.
do that.
Well, no, that's okay. Let's see. Gender fluid. A person who identifies as gender fluid has a gender identity and presentation that shifts between or shifts outside of society's expectations of gender.
Still haven't defined it. This
Right.
is on the
It's
Gender
all
queer.
nonsense.
The person who identifies as a gender queer has a gender identity or expression that is not the same as society's isn't that the same? Society's
Yeah.
expectations for the assigned
It's all
sex or
nonsense.
assumed
I
gender.
know it is.
It's
But-
utter nonsense.
But I'm trying to figure out is there a rational third gender?
Nope.
No,
Because I haven't heard anything that to me.
the only thing that is actually real as you could call it a third gender is intersex.
yeah,
which
but
is-
you can't call it a third
But
gender.
you can't really call it a gender
it's
because
genetic.
it's a genetic.
Genetic
It's a
defect.
genetic
Abnormality.
defect.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so,
yeah.
but there is no. That's the thing about this. They make all this stuff up.
Of course.
Right.
But I was just seeing whether or not someone gave you something you could plausibly say, okay, I could see that. Because-
Non-binary, they might say, is the third.
What is that? You can't define something by saying what is not.
It's the absence of
the absence. There's nothing.
Here's
That's what I'm saying. Go
here's
ahead.
aquagender, a gender that changes depending on what kind of body of water you are near, such as
Oh,
ocean,
my.
lakes, pools.
Oh my. That's still not.
This
That's
is the
still
world
not a
we-
gender. But anyway, that's fine. That's fine.
The
Okay.
world has gone
So
insane.
you can figure out. Yeah. Okay. All
Well,
right.
the fact that people take this seriously,
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly.
That is
Exactly.
that is
This
the
is-
crazy
this is-
part.
and the
We've
fact-
always had crazy
That's-
people.
and we have,
We've always
and,
had
and it
crazy
is at
people,
the
and-
highest levels of government.
Oh.
The
Right.
highest level of
Oh,
the government.
Levine.
With Levine, who's in
Rachel
charge
Levine.
of public health for the United States,
Oh.
is there's something seriously wrong with that person, and
man. Yes.
and he is saying
Oh, that might get us
that
kicked off.
transgender is settled science. It is not.
No, it is settled science.
Says-
It doesn't exist.
Right.
That's
Says the
settled
man that
science.
steals women's luggage.
No,
That's
no,
the other one.
Oh,
That's
That's
Sam
the other
Brennan.
I'm mixing them up.
That's his buddy,
Oh.
Sam.
Yeah,
Brennan.
he had to get kicked out because he was stealing women's clothing.
Right.
So he got kicked out of the administration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's always been evil people and crazy people. It's the
Yes.
mushy middle that
Yes.
allows it to
Yes.
continue. So it's time to pick a side. Stop staying in the
Yes.
middle.
Amen,
Pick a
sister.
side.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Go with
again,
the crazy and the evil, or go with.
and again,
Sanity.
someone said this, and I think it's right. It says this is no longer. We're no longer voting between Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal. We're voting for sanity and insanity. That's what we're voting on at this point.
Yeah.
And you look at the men in the Biden administration who dressed up as women, sitting around in all their uniforms, the Air Force, because all these generals and admirals crossed over, and the picture said,
We have trans admirals now?
Yes, right.
"Oh, you
know
ever seen
that.
the whole picture? It was
I
like
have
5 of them
not.
sitting there, Abby.
Oh, my
And they're all in high heels and lipsticks, and they got a picture of a meeting, and the meme goes, "This is why China no longer fears us. This is why they flew the balloon over us, and this is why they'll invade soon."
Are you for real? Is that?
Yes, I'll
Are
find
you
it for you.
serious?
No,
we
that's
have
true.
Yes.
we have trans.
We got it all over. It's like 5 or
lots
6 of them,
trans
all men
admirals.
dressed up like
Right.
women. Yes.
Yeah, we have
It's all over.
transgender general officers.
Oh.
I'll show you. It's all of yeah. I'll show you. But we've got 2 minutes, Vicki.
I wanted to thank Tom for joining
Yes.
us again and helping,
Yes.
expose where the church has been involved in some of this stuff. It's really tragic. It's really tragic to know that people who are supposed to be working for God have done such evil things.
Well, I mean, that makes it all the more important for the people of God. Fix it.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, thank you again, Tom. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Abby, as always.
Thanks for having me.
Till next time. Thank you
Pinching
very
myself.
much.
Pinch myself.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
For such a time as this,